Right-wing losers' obsession with the casting of the Odyssey has turned out to be insanely funny because, boys, it wasn't the casting you should have been worried about. It's the themes. You guys are so flatly obsessed with the idea of a Black Helm of Troy or a trans man Achilles that you got absolutely railroaded by a fantastic interpretation that specifically is about your rotten politics. And the casting was perfect too. Christopher Nolan got woke, and it rules. The Odyssey is, in every way, about as direct a repudiation and condemnation of Trumpism as One Battle After Another was. Where that one was more internal and psychological, this one is more sociological. But both are very much the work of 55-year-old dudes who came of age during an era of seemingly surface-level depolitization, the end of history, so to speak, who are now concerned with the world that society is handing their children. And so both made movies about it, and they're coming to terms with history being perpetually political, and now the need for radicalization to fight the internal forces oppressing us. Politically, I think Nolan started as a kind of normal, center-left, very Western-coded director. That's not to criticize him more than anyone else. That was kind of the default position of most people of a certain class and professional type circa 2012. Earnest Obama voters, believers in the American dream, and so on. And like all Americans, that came with some kind of understanding of the cowboy archetype, the good demon that can beat the bad demon, as they say in True Detective. The man that you need on the wall, as Jack Nicholson says in A Few Good Men. The wolf in the land of wolves, as Benicio del Toro says in Sicario. And so in The Dark Knight, we get one of the best expressions of that story. It's very contextual to its time, being made in the wake of the first revelations about widespread mass surveillance that the government was, and is, doing to all of us. And he presents a story in which that use is justified if the hero immediately destroys it after using it, and, this is crucial, if the hero is prepared to be unknown or exiled after doing it. Nolan talked about both this and his political consciousness at the time to Tom Shone for the book The Nolan Variation, saying, quote, "The Dark Knight films absolutely believe in heroism, but what they say is, true heroism is invisible. That's the kind of heroism that people aspire to but almost never live up to in my experience. I feel very good about what we did in the Dark Knight trilogy because it has been equally claimed by the right and by the left in terms of conversation, and that feels like we win." There we have it, a filmmaker who's saying true heroism is invisible. That's why Batman has to be the bad guy at the end of The Dark Knight. If you are going to do something truly heroic, you have to be okay with being hated, with living on the edge, which is the cowboy myth. And indeed, many right-wing commenters use the movie to justify George W. Bush and the surveillance state. Quote, "The film's politics seem to suggest that Americans want to maintain the myth of national innocence, but that secretly acknowledge that the extra-legal excesses of the Bush administration may be necessary to fight evil," wrote Ron Briley of the History News Network. Continuing, quote, "George Bush becomes the Dark Knight who is repudiated by the public but whose actions have saved us, and at some future date, his decisions, like those of Harry Truman in the Cold War, will be celebrated by historians and the public." Harry Truman, eh? I wonder if that character will come back at any point in Christopher Nolan's filmography to mark his developing political consciousness. But still, genuinely, I think the movie served as a kind of agitprop for the idea of the Obama presidency. For most Americans, it wasn't that we shouldn't do imperialism in order to save or benefit America, it's that we should do it smartly. Smart wars, as Obama said, not dumb wars. Wars run in secret by special operations forces who didn't claim credit, who were prepared to be true heroes. Unfortunately, as it turns out, that's just as harmful. Basically, all those guys came home and either lied about what they did like American sniper Chris Kyle, or started tactical coffee companies or podcasts. Endless podcasts. Like 38 different guys claimed to kill bin Laden, but maybe it really was like Murder on the Orient Express. And Nolan continued the same kind of mindset with The Dark Knight Rises. It had lots of iconography that suggested Tea Party stuff, but especially was taken to be another right-wing movie that was critical of Occupy Wall Street, something that frustrated Nolan. Again, to Tom Shone in the Nolan Variations, he said, quote, "I think you have to go out of your way to look at the film and attribute to it right-wing characteristics. If anything, it's specifically left-wing. When people listen to Bane and say he sounds like Donald Trump or that Donald Trump sounds like him, well, it's about a demagogue. He's the bad guy. What was I afraid of when I made The Dark Knight Rises? I was afraid of demagoguery. Turns out I was right to be afraid. The film was not supposed to be political. It's not intended to be. It's about primal fears." That is something myself and many on the left get frustrated with liberals and centrists about. We're out here saying, maybe we should give people healthcare and schooling, and the other side is reading from Mein Kampf and trying to build 1,000-foot walls. And it's a perpetual instinct for centrists and liberals to say, well, we don't want demagoguery first and foremost on either side. The Nolan Variation quotes some of the positive right-wing reviews and then goes on to quote a center-right conservative commentator. Quote, "Somewhere in the middle was New York Times columnist Ross Douthat. He writes, across the entire trilogy, what separates Bruce Wayne from his mentors in the League of Shadows isn't a belief in Gotham's goodness. It's a belief that a compromised order can still be worth defending, and that darker things than corruption and inequality will follow from putting that order to the torch. This is a conservative message, but not a triumphalist, chest-thumping, rah-rah capitalism one. It reflects a quiet Toryism rather than a noisy Americanism, and it owes much more to Edmund Burke than to Sean Hannity." I don't think that's really a conservative message, but that's semantics. I do think it is a centrist message, though, regardless of which side of centrism you fit on. It's a belief in institutions and great men of history, one that Batman Begins also falls right in line with both Bruce Wayne and his billionaire parents serving to prop up the social order rather than let the thing collapse. In Interstellar, you start to see slight cracks with its fascinating commentary on gender via the Dr. Mann character especially, but it's still kind of a normie I freaking love science movie, very optimistically putting NASA at the center of it, that icon of American patriotic achievement. But Dunkirk 2, released right after Trump took office, is like, okay, the forces of fascism are coming, but we can beat them with grit and unity and all pitching in. We can still save the Western idea. In Tenet, I think, is someone coming to terms with their place in a world that they've newly discovered to be on the brink of collapse. It's woke Nolan going back in time to teach centrist Nolan how to try and stop an oligarch who is so self-centered that he wants to destroy the entire world because he feels personally aggrieved. And so we get to Oppenheimer and our friend Harry S. Truman. Well, not friend. What a perverted and evil and demented and stupid little man he was. My own personal tenet would involve me going back in time and getting the King Henry A. Wallace back as the vice president for FDR. I think Matt Christman said in The Great Hell of Presidents that although the great man theory history is stupid, Henry A. Wallace really did have the juice. Wish you were here, King. For me, I was blown away in the theater when we got to that Truman scene in Oppenheimer. When have you ever seen such an awful and accurate portrayal of a historical American president in a mainstream American movie? Like, even when we are critical of him, there is still a baseline representation of competence and coherent thought. The only thing you get from Truman in Oppenheimer is dumbly believing that the Russians can't build a nuclear bomb and then being proud of dropping the bomb. Contrast this with Nolan's definition of a hero from before. This is not someone who's having regrets over the war crime of dropping the bomb or thinking of it as a necessary evil. This is someone who is completely fine, satisfied, happy, whatever you want to call it, with their legacy as the person who made the decision to do something so unspeakably evil. Oppenheimer, I think, is the work of someone coming to grips with their contribution to the idea and promulgation of America as a concept. It's someone who contributed to America because it seemed just in the face of a greater evil, always the excuse of a tyrant, and who realized too late that what they contributed to was putting more global power in the hands of guys like Harry Truman. It's the same dynamic that Kathryn Bigelow explored in her mid-career stuff versus A House of Dynamite. Both are works of artists coming to terms with the danger and the weakness of the institutions themselves, not just whether or not we have the right people in there. And so Oppenheimer ends with a fear that by contributing to the nuclear weapons program, i.e. the idea of America as the global hegemon, he did in fact cause a chain reaction that will end up destroying the world. Which brings us to the Odyssey. The Odyssey is woke as hell, and I loved it. I'm not sure if I've talked about this before, but I did about 9/10 of a classics major before having to switch colleges, so your boy loves the Greeks. I did an entire semester on just the Iliad and the Odyssey, and my capstone thesis for my time as a classics major was a very long paper on Greek tragedy on film. And I've always loved Nolan, so to say I was excited about this movie is a bit of an understatement. That said, I was skeptical. Not for the reasons right-wingers were. Honestly, I was fascinated when I heard that Elliot Page was going to play Achilles, the greatest of all Greek warriors, last portrayed by washboard abs masculine icon Brad Pitt. And Lupita Nyong'o, a black woman as Helena Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships? Hell yeah. If you went to central casting for those roles, you would get like Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney. But that would be boring. We've been getting epics with white heteronormative beauty standards for years in film and theater. There's a reason Orson Welles' Voodoo Macbeth is so well regarded. What an interesting adaptation choice. Because the Odyssey has been full of interesting adaptations for thousands and thousands of years. This is honestly the funniest thing about the frothing mad reactions by dumb guys like Elon Musk and others. For all the talk about protecting the culture and erasing the Western canon, it's like, are you out of your mind?
Are you fucking out of your mind?
You mean Lysistrata, where the women get together and refuse their husbands in the bedroom until they stop fighting? That's full of endless puns about swords and lances and columns, where Harold shows up bricked up and the guys are like, why do you hide that lance that sticks out under your arms? I've brought no lance. Then why do you turn aside and hold your cloak so far out from your body? Is your groin swollen with the stress of traveling? You mean the Iliad, where Achilles doesn't rejoin the fight until they kill his boyfriend? That homosexual love story that Aeschylus, Plato, and tons of other Greeks and Romans talked about explicitly, that Shakespeare wrote about? These right-wing morons have no interest in actual studying classics in the Western canon, which drives me nuts. It's that thing from Seinfeld where Jerry is more offended because his doctor converted to Judaism for the jokes.
I have a suspicion that he's converted to Judaism purely for the jokes.
And this offends you as a Jewish person?
No, it offends me as a comedian.
It's like, yeah, it offends me as a leftist, but it honestly offends me more as a hobbyist classicist. I had to read 3 different translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey in undergrad. You shouldn't be calling out Emily Wilson for being woke, you should be calling out Robert Fitzgerald for not being as poetic as Richmond Lattimore, you absolute tool, you weapon, you company man.
Where did you learn your trade, you stupid fucking, you idiot, you company man?
No, the reason I was skeptical is because we've been in an era of largely depoliticized popular filmmaking for years now, and Oppenheimer, much like One Battle After Another, was a hugely important cultural artist trying to make something relevant and perceptive about America, which I just want as a viewer more and more. I was worried, in other words, that he was going to return to escapism and just do something thrilling, which he's very good at and I would have liked, like Inception or The Prestige, but not loved. I go to the movies to be moved in some way, and it's very hard to do that with pure escapism. So when I saw the kind of modern traditional costumes, I was worried, but again, not for the reason the idiots were worried. Frankly, the costumes in the Odyssey itself are not accurate to the time it depicts. It's full of what's called false archaism and anachronistic stuff. That is to say, it's full of things that felt old to the Greeks during the time of its composition, but was more reflective of the time in which it was written than the time it depicted. I was more worried because they seemed a bit too conservative and modern. I love something like Pasolini's Oedipus Rex just visually for its style. In that movie, he purposely mixed like 100 different cultures to make his costumes feel ancient, but totally unlike any historical reference the viewer would have. Nolan's approach felt like it could be a lost opportunity, but I was withholding judgment until I saw it because there might be a very good reason they're dressed like that. And what do you know, it turns out there is a very good reason they're dressed like that. The costumes serve multiple purposes in the movie. Firstly, to almost disappear as a noticeable element. They're like so exaggeratedly simple that your mind kind of stops considering them as a novel element, which helps to center the story for us as modern viewers. Our suspension of disbelief can focus on the Cyclops or the Sirens or any of the other mythical stuff. But two, more interestingly, the ancient Greeks would have been proud of the costumes because of how they simplified and exaggerated the characters, much like they did in their own time. As you probably know, the Greeks wore masks and costumes when they performed, which, quote, gave the audience an immediate sense of character type, gender, age, social status, and class. In the classic melodramatic style of Hollywood, we often did the same things with costumes, music, and even star performers. One of the functions of the star system was that you knew when Peter Lorre came on screen that he was probably playing a devious little creep. You knew that John Wayne would never shoot anyone in the back. You knew that Thelma Ritter functioned often as a kind of working class oracle. This was reinforced in their dress, which the movies often even explicitly commented on, as in Thelma Ritter's The Mating Season. What this did for the Greeks in many 1950s movies was what we might call Brechtian. Reducing the complexity of the elements allows us to think more deeply about the individual elements. It's like looking at a Rothko. You're almost forced to do more active work to figure out what it means to you because it's so aggressive in its surface level simplicity of form. In Nolan's Odyssey, I think the costumes function not as exaggeratedly stereotypical like in a 50s melodrama, but instead exaggeratedly simple. But I think serving a largely similar function. It allows us to consider what is actually happening with the rest of the elements in the movie and the situations they're in. And over, he connects the story with various parts of modern America. Like first, I would be remiss if I didn't call out John Bernthal and Lupita Nyong'o as perfect casting in two different ways. Like, Bernthal is arguably the best casting in the history of cinema. I'll stand on that. I don't want to hear another word about Nolan not understanding the text, because making what can only be described as Long Island Menelaus is so good. So good. So much of ancient Greek stuff, especially the Iliad, concerns petty male disputes over the possession of women. And that just fits in brilliantly with the kind of hyper-macho, old-school Northeastern attitude towards women. Like, if you think of many Greek kings as Phil Leotardo or Paulie Walnuts from The Sopranos, you'll be halfway there.
How about this humidity?
Add to that the obvious colonial and racial implications of having a black wife that he is obsessed with, possessive of, scared of, violent towards, and that he both hates and wants to completely control, and it's just tremendous. A perfect interpretation and modern adaptation of the story. So many people know exactly who that guy is just from watching it. Because my god, the colonial implications of this. Spoilers ahead, but this is a story about finding out that, are we the baddies the whole time? Odysseus and his men are America at the end of history after the fall of the Soviet Union. Much like America, Odysseus goes from island to island doing imperialism and getting blasted by the locals until he has to flee. Like us in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and now Iran, and so on. Nolan makes this a movie about a violation of fundamental laws of God, or nature, or human rights, or whatever you want to call it, which is both a genius and relevant choice for our time, but also so reverential to what the Odyssey and the Iliad were about in so many places. What he calls Zeus's law is the concept of ksenia, or guest friendship, something that was so cross-cultural in the ancient world. Haknas and Orkim, which I'm probably saying wrong, is the ancient Jewish mitzvah for it, for example. Ksenia was so important to the Greeks that, in one of my favorite moments of the Iliad, Diomedes and Glaucus meet in the middle of battle, each having murked hundreds of guys. Then they recognize each other and are like, oh damn, our grandfathers hosted each other one time. I guess we're guest friends, we can't fight. And then they swap armor literally like it's the end of a soccer game and they're swapping jerseys. In this, Nolan makes the central violation of ancient law the deception of Odysseus with the Trojan horse and subsequent pillage and violence in the city of Troy. Again, very Oppenheimer coded, but also very Iliad coded. I've read some insane things online since watching it, like the Greeks didn't feel PTSD or the Greeks didn't feel guilt, but like, are you out of your mind? You mean the ending of the Iliad where Priam and Achilles have a cry about age and the death of their loved ones together, where the gods directly command all involved to have a truce so that they can all grieve properly? That Iliad? It's such a brilliant choice because the defining thing for so many moderate Americans recently, in a similar way to the political evolution of the girl boss as shown by Catherine Bigelow's evolution in her movies, has been seeing the actual devastation we've wrought in so many other countries and the fear people have of America instead of us being a shining light, and then seeing all that stuff come home. Nolan has adapted the Odyssey and shown how it connects with the Imperial boomerang, which is such a tremendous choice. The sea people that everyone is afraid of turn out to be Odysseus and his crew. It was just a matter of perspective. Like, do you really think the Afghan people referred to our invasion of them as Operation Enduring Freedom? I really doubt it. In other words, the breaking of these ancient and divine and natural laws comes home. I was so curious to see how he handled what is basically a story of a guy coming home and whooping all the guys who are after his wife, but he somehow pulls it off and it's like, oh, of course that's what it should be. What this movie is saying is, the real danger has been us, and now the real enemy is at home. The people who are most violating all the precepts of international law and God's law and natural law are at home. Like the ones who are blatantly violating basic Christian precepts of love thy neighbor are at home. The ones who are masking themselves and violating any type of security norm are at home. The ones who are raiding the places most sacred in our society and then getting away with it are at home. The reason why the whole thing about the casting is so hilarious is, buddy, the most popular movie of the year is going to be the one in which political violence from normal people towards the right wing and 1% coalition is explicitly justified by its narrative. This is explicitly a story about Americans coming to terms with our imperialism and figuring out that the true enemy is inside the house, and that we should do something about it, like lock them in a room and solve the problem. I've often wondered how you do this type of action narrative, like this kind of Western action-y genre narrative, and not have it co-opted by the right. Like if you satirize or criticize them like in Starship Troopers or The Wolf of Wall Street, so many of them will just be like, yeah, these are the cool guys. Or if you show a hero being flawed and broken by their experiences, as in something like Lawrence of Arabia, many people just remember the cool parts, which no one has actually talked about. Again, to Tom Shone, the Nolan variations, talking about Lawrence, itself a critique of colonialism as well, saying, quote, it absolutely presents Lawrence as this vain, false icon, but what people take away is the iconography. That scene where he goes back for the guy in the desert, it's an amazingly rousing moment. Afterwards, they give him the robes and he becomes this icon. That moment feels sincere. But afterward, you see him admiring his reflection in the blade of his dagger. It's never again the same. It always feels like he's playing a role or he's living up to people's expectations. A lot of great films are like this. Which with this movie, I think he's figured out a way to get around, which is just cast black women and trans people. Like, was the cheat code really that simple? For years, I've been wondering how to do it since right-wingers are so stupid. It turns out you just gotta get on their level. They won't even see a film's message if it has a trans person or a black woman somewhere they don't like because of simple and stupid bigotry. So it turns out you can just excise them from liking a movie by just including those people. Tremendous. Side note, I also think Elliot Page is incredible in his role, and the fact that Odysseus throws him under the bus in service of imperialism before regretting it, well, what do centrists and Democrats love more than throwing trans people under the bus? The casting feels both incredible and symbolic in that way. And likewise, the casting of Zendaya as Athena is not only great because she's a great actress, but it's also great symbolically. Zendaya, frankly, looks like she could be from every country we've invaded in the last 50 years, which, combined with her dress, turns out to be very relevant. Odysseus' conception of Athena is a woman who he indirectly caused the death of during the fall of Troy. By contributing to this slaughter, he could have very well helped Athena die because Athena could be anybody. The simple costume stuff turns out to be a bit of a prestige-like trick. The reason she's dressed so commonly is because she is common. It'd be like making a modern version and making Athena a hotel worker or a farm laborer. The point is so well made. And so we get to the penultimate scene in which Odysseus and Telemachus take out the right-wingers violating God's law and occupying our country, and what does he have to do after he takes care of them? He leaves. We return to Nolan's conception of heroism, of true heroism being invisible. This is the end of the Searchers again, the old American cowboy myth. It's even a specific and explicit point in the story that he doesn't want his son to help murk the suitors because he has to remain pure in the eyes of the gods, and his son helping would violate Ksenia. So one more time in a Nolan hero movie, the hero has to be the silent guardian, the Dark Knight. And I found it so fitting that the movie literally ends on a shot of a burning Trojan horse, the horse being the iconic image of the American Western. Like Nolan is somehow doing a revisionist Western in the American sense like The Searchers or Unforgiven, but also a revisionist Western in terms of the Western canon. The horse burning is both the state of America as well as what needs to happen to America's imperialism. Which, like, all I can say is, what a movie, what an adaptation.